First, turn your Bibles to Genesis chapter 12. Those of you who have been here for this series, I told you at the beginning, we're going through where the word go is found in the Bible, and it's found 1,352 times. You'll be happy to know in between last week and this week I skipped, I think, 3 of those. We're moving right along. Genesis chapter 12. Planned on skipping further, but every time I plan on that, I start reading the passage where it is, and I can't seem to get past it. So we're not moving along quite how I thought. Genesis chapter 12, I'm going to start reading verse 1. When you find a place, go ahead and stand this evening. I'm going to read just Genesis 12, verses 1 through 5. It says, "Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed, as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came." We're going to stop right there, and let's have a word. Go ahead and be seated. Tonight's kind of, for my studying purposes, title for the message is "When God Says Go." The passage is one that most of us have probably heard. You have Abram here, and God comes to him and says, "Go." And really an interesting situation. I'll get into some of that as we go through the message, and I'm basically going to spend no time on the introduction tonight, because if I do, I'm going to get ahead of myself in the message, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to get right into this. But in verse 1, God comes to Abram and he says, "Get thee out of thy country." He's telling Abram it's time to go. And what I want us to focus on this evening is what happens when God says go. First of all, tonight, when God says go, he often doesn't give the details. Look at verse 1. "Now the Lord said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee." Tells Abram it's time for you to leave the land of your fathers, the place that you are comfortable in. This is where he's grown up, if you will. It's what he knows, and he now has to leave that. I remember the day when I was a kid that my dad took the family into the living room and said, "We're leaving Astoria." For me, I've always been one that change doesn't bother me too much. I kind of like it, but it's exciting. But Astoria was all that Bo and I had ever known. I was 9 years old at that point, and had been born in a town, 15, 20 minutes away from where we lived. My entire life had been spent right there, and the same for my brother. Everything that we knew was in that town. We had traveled and things like that, but as far as what we knew as home and friends and the things that we were comfortable with were all there. And now Dad's saying we're leaving that, and I can remember myself being excited about the move, but at the same time somewhat nervous, because you don't know what's ahead. We had been to and visited where we were moving to, but that's a whole lot different than living there. And that's what Abram is facing here. This is everything that he knew was right where he was. And now he was leaving that, except for Abram it was even worse, because he didn't know where he was going. At least when my dad took us in there, he said, "This is where we're moving to." Abram didn't have that. He's leaving everything he knows. He's leaving what he's comfortable with, everything that he's accustomed to, and God tells him no details. God didn't tell him where he was going. He doesn't say, you're going to leave the place where you are right now and you're going to go to this land. No, we don't see that. He says, "Just go and I'll tell you when to stop." Can you imagine that? God's saying, just go, and when you're there, I'm going to tell you you're there. It would have depended on this. He doesn't, and he doesn't even know where he's going. Everything depends on this move, and he doesn't even know where he's going. That detail isn't divulged. God didn't tell him how long the trip would take. He just says, keep going. I'll tell you when to stop. You think about it, that's kind of an important detail. Traveling back in Abram's day wasn't like today. Today, if you're traveling along and get hungry, there's a McDonald's at every exit. You can basically stop anywhere and get food. It wouldn't have been like that. If he wanted to eat along the way, you're going to have to pack something. Well, if you're packing food for a journey, it's kind of important to know how long your journey is going to be. God doesn't give him that detail. God doesn't tell him how long he's going to be gone. He says you're going to leave the land of your fathers or your father's country. He doesn't say for a week or a month or a year or your lifetime. He just says go. And I could go on and on and on tonight with things that God didn't tell Abraham. I was thinking about as I prepared for this message this week that you could basically name off any important detail that you would want to know before a trip, and the answer would be God didn't tell him. Finances, God didn't tell him. Shelter, God didn't tell him. Food, God didn't tell him. On and on we could go. God didn't give details. He just said, it's time to go. Get out of your country. Go. Can I tell you something? God was teaching Abram to trust him. It's exactly what it is. You don't need details, Abram. Just know that I can handle it. I know where. I know what you'll need. I know how long you're going to be gone. I know you'll need provision. I know you'll need shelter. I know you'll need food. And I have it under control. He was right then teaching Abram something that would play a big role later on in his life. He was teaching him to trust God. To know that God said go, and while I may not know the details, I need to trust that He's in control. As I was studying for this, it kind of hit me, and seems obvious, but it hit me as I was studying this. Sometimes, or a lot of times, God does the same in our lives. He says, I want you to go. And remember the context of the series, go isn't always leaving somewhere. Go is an action. Times where God says, I want you to do this, and He doesn't give all the detail. He doesn't answer all of the questions we have, all of the things that we would even say are important for us to know. For Abram, I'm sure if you asked him, he would have said, well, yeah, it's kind of important for me to know when I'm leaving where I'm going to. God often doesn't give us the details that we would think are important. And in those, He's teaching us to simply trust Him, which that isn't easy. Most of you who know me know that I'm a pretty laid-back person. But I like to be in control of things. I was thinking about my way of wording it. I go with the flow as long as I control the flow. As long as I can make sure I know where the flow is going, I'll go along with it just fine. But God does this, and it doesn't allow for me to be in control. When God doesn't give the details, I have no control. I just have to trust that He has control. When God says go, He often doesn't give the details. Number two, when God says go, He blesses obedience. Look at verses 2 and 3 again. It says, and I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee. And I will give, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. I don't know if you notice in those two verses how many times God says, I'm going to bless. There are, as I read, I found 5 things that He says, Abram, if you go, you will be blessed in these ways. First of all, I'll give you a land. Right now, you're in the land of your fathers. You are where you're comfortable and familiar. But if you'll go where I tell you to, how the passage words it, I'll show you a land. If you give me a little bit of liberty, He's saying, I'll give you a place to call your own. Which is a big deal. It may seem small, but this is no small thing to have a place that was His own. The place where He could know God wants me here. Not because this is where his family was, not because someone else wanted him to be there, but because this is the place that God had for him. You'll go, I'll give you a land, not a place where someone else said for you to be, but where I want you to be. says, if you'll go, I'll make thee a great nation. Look at it this way, I'll bless your family. God isn't just saying you'll be a great nation in numbers, but I'll make them my nation. I mean, see, we get wrapped up in numbers. God doesn't. Don't take this the wrong way. We should be a church that is involved in outreach. And I don't mean to say that we shouldn't in any way, but I don't think God cares if a church runs 10 or 10,000. I think God cares where those people are spiritually. I think God would rather a church of 10 who are sold out on fire for Him than a church of 10,000 that are Sunday morning only Christians. It says, if you'll go, I'll bless your family. It's not just in number, but they'll be mine. It says, if you go, I'll bless you personally. I'll provide, I'll care for you. Abram didn't have to go on this journey wondering, well, where's my next meal going to come from, God? He didn't have to take off wondering, if he would survive the trip, because he knew if I go, God's going to bless me. It says, if you go, you'll be a blessing. I find this one to myself interesting. Not only am I going to bless your family, not only am I going to bless you personally, but those who come in contact with you will be blessed. It says you'll be a blessing. Those who come in contact will be blessed. I want you to look at it from the point of view of everyone along the route that Abram traveled. If everywhere he traveled, the people that came in contact with him were cursed, and you knew he was headed your way, would you be very welcoming toward him? No, if you knew this guy's coming, I'm going to use David again since he was Abram a minute ago. If you knew everyone that David came in contact with was cursed, and David says, hey, I'm swinging by your house this afternoon, you'd lock the door, you'd be gone, you'd something, you wouldn't want to be anywhere near him. You'd be as far away as you possibly could. But if everyone that he came in contact with was blessed, well, that changes people's tunes. Suddenly, you want David to come over to your house. Suddenly, you want Abram to travel your way. You want to do business with him. You want to let him use your wells and to pass through your land and all those sorts of things. God says, if you'll go, you'll be a blessing. And then he says, if you'll go, I'll protect you. The verse, he says, I'll bless those that bless you and curse those who curse you. Those who are good to you, I'll be good to, but those who oppose you, I'll oppose. Suddenly that makes the idea of traveling to an unknown land a lot easier. Because probably the scariest part of this trip, at least in my mind, what would have been the most nerve-wracking would have been, what if the people aren't welcoming? Along the journey and wherever I'm stopping. What if I get there and they want to kill me because they don't want me there? I mentioned the move to California when I was a kid earlier. It was, in my mind, really cool. I thought it was great. We got to live on a college campus. My dad saw all the things. I think it's funny, when my dad tells stories of the campus there, it's always the rats on the campus and the dilapidated buildings. For a kid, it was great. We had room to run on the campus, and I got to hang out with college kids who spoiled us because they thought if they got on our good graces that my dad, the dean, wouldn't kick them out of school. I mean, it was great, It was, for me, it was really good. But one of the things that came with being there was lots of travel. We went to nearly every weekend, went to different churches for my dad to preach at and promote the college. And as a kid, at first, that was, I thought that was great too, but it didn't take long until that unknown of what if I'm not welcomed became a real thing. I wouldn't have thought of it, but it didn't take long before we'd start driving somewhere and you're thinking to yourself, wonder how the kids in this church are going to be. Because in that time of traveling, we had everything from in the middle of Sunday school, a kid spitting on us, to some churches where we were threatened, and one church where there was another new kid who was being picked on, and when I stuck up for him, with the teacher watching, the rest of the class picked me up and chucked me out the door of the classroom. The teacher couldn't get them to stop, and so he just watched them do it. It was a real thing for Bo and I, wondering, what if they don't welcome us? And I can see that from Abram. When this first happens, I'm going to leave, I'm going to go to an unknown land, I don't know where I'm going. What if they're not nice? What if they're headhunters? What if they, what? You have no idea. What if I go and they don't want me there? But God tells him, don't worry about that. If you'll go, I'll take care of you. Well, that can alleviate that worry. I don't have to worry about if they're going to welcome me because God's going to take care of me. And the same is true in our life. If we go and do what God wants, He'll show us the place we want. And if we'll go, He'll bless our family and He'll bless your life and those around you, and He'll take care of you. When God says go, we looked at, when God says go, He often doesn't give the details. When God says go, He blesses obedience. And then last night, when God says go, go. Amen. Just keep that real simple. When God says go, go. Don't argue. Don't question. Don't fight it. Just go. Look at verses 4 and 5. So Abram departed. Started there. We'll read the rest of verses 4 and 5 in a minute. But just that statement right there. God says, go, I'm going to bless you if you go. The very next verse. So Abram departed. He went. As the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he had departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go in the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. They went. God says, go. You don't need the details. Just go and trust that I'll take care of the rest. And I find it amazing. They go. No argument. No question. They go. I can picture God telling Abraham, go. Giving him no details. Just go. And Abram, in my mind, if it were us, saying, sure, God, where? I'd be happy to go. Where am I going? Just give me a little bit of detail with this, God. You don't have to explain it everything to me, but at least give me something. But then here's where I started thinking about this. Reading verses 4 and 5, we often focus on the obedience of Abram. But he didn't travel alone. Picture him going to his wife. How I thought as I'm saying is, picture him going to his wife and starting off by saying, start packing, honey, we're moving. Sarah's saying, moving? To where? Well, I don't know, but we're going. Wives in here, can you imagine your husband coming home from work and saying, pack the house, we're taking off tomorrow? Where are we going? I don't know. We're just going to start driving. When God says put it in park, that's where we're stopping. You'd think he'd lost his mind. But we don't see a fight. We don't see pots and pans flying across the house at him. We don't see any argument. They just go. He goes to Lot, his nephew. We see that Lot went with him. Pack your stuff. We're going. To where? I don't know. We're just going. God said go. We're going. Doesn't argue. Just goes. Abram's servants, get your stuff together. Get the flocks ready. We're moving. Sure, boss. Where are we going? I don't know. God says go. We're going. And again, no argument. This affected a lot of people. A lot more than just Abram. But God said go. And they went. They trusted Him and obeyed. That simple. They trusted, well, if God said do it, that's what we need to do. God said go. When do we leave? Here's where this comes to us. God quite often comes to us and says, go. Go. Maybe as I said, not moving, but some action, something He wants us to do. And very often He doesn't explain the details to us. We just need to trust that He knows the details. Know that when we obey Him, He'll bless, and just go. Just obey. We waste way too much of our time arguing with God rather than serving God. I think if we were honest with ourselves, we would say that we waste way too much of our time saying, God, I need to know details before I can do this for you. Sure, God, I'm happy to serve you. I surrender all. I give my life to you. But you got to tell me what you want me to do first. And we've all heard people who have surrendered their life to God, but God, I don't want to be a missionary. I want to obey you, God. I want to do what you want, but I want some details first. We waste all sorts of time in our life arguing with God over what He wants us to do and needing to know it, rather than just doing what He wants. When in reality, what we need to do, just keep this super simple. What we need to do is when God says go, just go. Simply obey. And trust that all those other details, all those other things that we think we have to know, He has in control. All those things that we think that God, I can't do this unless I know what's going to happen with this, trust that He knows. And just simply go. Let's pray.